Today's video, we're going to be talking through Mega Backdoor Roth at UPMC. Specifically, we're going to use examples for physicians. So starting out, this is a very unique opportunity. In 2014, there was a tax code passed called 2014-54. You can look this up. That allows for what I'm going to explain in this video. But first, I want to provide a couple IRS limits. So a lot of you will be familiar with what's called a 402G limit. A 402G limit is simply what you can put into a elective, deferral, or Roth or pre-tax. So when you go in, the first thing you select is how much you want to put in, and you want that to go Roth or pre-tax. If you're under 50, and this is for 2024 calendar year specifically, as the IRS adjusts these amounts for inflation, not every year, but typically every year. So they got adjusted a little bit in from 2023 to 2024. So now if you're under 50, you can put into $23,000 per year. And put that into a Roth or pre-tax. And if you're over 50, there's a catch-up of $7,500, so you can put in the $23,000 plus an additional $7,500 for a total amount of $30,500. So the big question then is, where do I put this money? Do I put it into a Roth? Where a Roth, you pay the taxes on the way in, so your paychecks will be a little bit more as the money's going in after tax, but then it grows tax-free, and then when you take it out, assuming that you're 59 and a half, then it's all tax-free, and it doesn't hit your what's called your modified adjusted gross income. So a couple problems we see with pre-tax. Now let's talk about pre-tax for a second. The money goes in with no taxes early on. So the nice thing is, if you put in, let's say hypothetically you're 30,000, making 30,000, or I'm sorry, you put in 30,000 pre-tax and you're in a 35% tax bracket. That year alone, you're going to save $10,500 per that year in taxes, assuming you're in a 35% federal tax bracket. But to get that benefit up front, you also get the benefit of no taxes as it grows. But when you take it out, assuming you're 59 and a half and you don't have a 10% penalty, you take it out, it all gets taxed at whatever rate you're in the future. And so one argument to do pre-tax over Roth now is very simply, am I going to be in a lower tax bracket when I retire than I am today? Can I get it in at 35% savings today and then take it out at 22% later? And so a couple other things I'm going to say, it's not just a tax calculation, but usually our high net worth clients, so those making, let's say 500,000 plus of income per year, what we find is they accumulate enough assets that when they retire, even though their kids are out of the house is paid off, maybe their school loans are paid down. What we find is that their tax bracket is similar to what it was when they were working, when factoring in these pre-tax distributions, because at 73, required distributions start out of this thing. And when you add up Social Security and dividends and interest from your non-qualified account, typically you're going to be right back in that tax bracket. So the reason we really do like Roth being at least a third of your portfolio when you retire is not only do we get tax-free, if you roll the Roth to a Roth IRA, then you have no required distributions. This avoids Medicare surcharges, or it doesn't get calculated in. If one spouse passes, the tax brackets get cut in half, so you're able to, as a widow, manage taxes. And then really sequence of return risk is huge here, and we have videos and resources that we'll reference just specifically on those. But just a quick breakdown between the difference between Roth and pre-tax. So the next up for the UPMC is what's called a 415C limit. A 415C limit is the total amount that's able to go into your 403B in 2024. Same thing as a 401k. Under 50, the total is $69,000. Over 50, the total is $76,500. And so now the question is, well, how do we get that money in? Well, real quick, when we talk about a match, I do want to point out that the maximum compensation for 2024 the IRS allows on a match is $345,000. So now let's use an example of a physician that's under the age of 50 that's making $500,000. So how would we maximize this Mega Backdoor Roth? And what are the mechanics? So first of all, we'd recommend, let's select the elective deferral. Let's do a $23,000 contribution there and set that up to achieve that through every paycheck throughout the year. So usually we'll specify a dollar amount. And then the match of 3%, you need to put in 6%. So we'll show you why we're going to make sure you put in 6% in a second. But to get the free money, it's a 50% match up to 6%. So if you're making $500,000, 3% of $500,000 is $15,000. Will you get that? The answer is no. They'll only match you 3% of $345,000, which is the max the IRS allows them to match you. So the match actually ends up being $10,350. Well, $23,000 plus $10,350, that's not the max of $69,000. So where else do we go? Well, there's two other options to get the total of the $69,000 in there. There's a profit sharing. Now that would be up to UPMC. They do not do that currently. And then the fourth thing would be an after-tax contribution, which is capped at 6%. So if you're making $500,000, 6% of $500,000 is $30,000. So now the total that we're putting in is $23,000 into the Roth, $10,350 into, is the match, the free money, and then $30,000 is the after tax. So the total is $63,350. So we're not quite up to the $69,000, but this is the most in this example we could do. To get the full $69,000 in, we would need to make a little bit more money. So hypothetically, if you were making $600,000, then 6% of the after tax $600,000 would be 36, and you could reach the full $69,000. So if this is your 403B, basically what you've done is it's one account, but the IRS and UPMC will track this separately. So the first, imagine you have three compartments in your 403B bucket. The first compartment is the Roth. That gets tracked separately, and when you retire, you can roll this to a Roth IRA. The second compartment is the match. Now, this is going to come out with taxes when you retire because UPMC funded it all in with, they took the tax deduction on that. And then the third compartment is an after-tax bucket. So the after-tax bucket, if we leave that alone, what happens is, let's say you put in $30,000 for 10 years. And so you put in a total of $300,000. But then there's also that $300,000 grew to $600,000. So in that example, you have an after-tax bucket. We're just looking at the after-tax. You put in $300,000. It grew to $600,000. You go now retire. The $300,000 comes out with zero taxes. That's just your basis being returned to you that you've already paid taxes on. But the $300,000 would still get taxed. And if you're at that 35% tax bracket, you're now paying $105,000 in federal taxes. That kind of hurts because this also has required minimum distributions attached to it at 73. However, this is where the Mega Backdoor Roth comes into play. So on a year-to-year basis, we can take that after tax. So just to draw this out again, so we have the Roth, we have the match, and then we have the after tax compartment. And so assuming that $30,000 per year is flowing in here, well, twice per year, you can convert that after-tax component over to the Roth. And so now, assuming in this example, let's say that you put in $30,000 and every year it grew to $31,000. When we do that conversion, you're going to get $30,000 over tax-free. The $1,000 of growth would get taxed that year at that tax bracket. So it cost you $350. And every year times 10 years, so that would cost us $3,500. But in the result, in that same example, if that $300,000 was converted inside every year to the Roth, along the way we would have paid $3,500 in federal taxes, a little bit each year. But then the same growth, we can invest in the same funds at $600,000. When you go to retire, since it's already in the Roth, there's absolutely zero taxes when you take it out. So now we've saved $105,000 in exchange for $3,500. And also we have no required minimum distributions, assuming that you roll to a Roth IRA. Now, one thing we have to look out for when we roll to a Roth IRA is there's a 5-year rule. If you pull it out after 5 years, before 5 years has elapsed from the conversion, there's a 10% penalty. So we really want to be disciplined and roll this right to a Roth IRA. After 59.5, if you're still working, UPMC allows you to do that, or you can do that when you retire. And we just have to wait 5 years, which typically Roth is a compartment that we want to touch, later in retirement, after we've exhausted some other resources, because that tax-free growth and that tax-free distribution for you, for your spouse, also goes to your kids tax-free. Estate taxes will be a completely separate issue, but there's lots of benefits to the Roth. So that's in general how to complete the Mega Backdoor Roth and a detailed overview of why it exists, how to do it, etc. Welcome any questions if you want to reach out and show you how to do this inside of the FIN-LYT portal, which again, you can do twice per year. You have to be careful when you do it because when you go to convert, you have to select the right amount, or else, if you're converting pre-tax money, you have to have a huge tax bill that we want to avoid. You can go in there and basically just select just the after tax that you're converting to the Roth on a year-to-year basis. Look forward to answering any questions, and thanks for joining.